No one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming.
We have a massive power, and it's the power to say no.
They put all these words on these flyers and it means nothing. It's garbage. We're all going to die!
Doctors are gaslighting patients.
If you keep silent, then this is what's going to happen. And they'll make us silent.
I would rather paper cut my eyelids than have any
We are one people, one flag, one Australia.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the ExCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp, joined again by Adam Zahra. Now, Adam, we had a very thought-provoking episode last week with Dana Pam. There's a few things that she said that really at least sparked my way of thinking. I wouldn't say it's good to sometimes get a perspective from someone that you might not always agree with originally. But I found some of the things she said to be quite thought-provoking. What did you think?
Yeah, I was the same too. Thanks, Stephen. It was just kind of like it was. I guess it was for us. It was odd because it was, the way I guess our stance, and then having somebody on who is like that, even though that they are on our kind of side of politics as per se, right? It's a bit confronting to try and but it's our duty to try and explore both sides of the argument, or both sides of the story, let's say, and give everyone a chance to speak. And sometimes it's funny not to have somebody on who you might 100% agree with, but I think it was made us better people, and and she was really, really good as well. I felt like she would have given people an opportunity to think about, hey, wait a second, they're not all like that. They're not all activists. They're just regular people just trying to blend in and just live their normal life, or the best life that they can. So I think it was a very good and a very thought-provoking episode as well.
Yeah, so that's what this platform is all about, putting people on, to hear what their views are. We might not always agree with them, but I think that's what it's all about. We are live streaming now on Facebook and YouTube. You can comment live there. I'll also be putting the link to the stream later in the show if you want to call in and ask special guests a question. We're also live streaming on Rumble as well. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see your comments there, but thank you for joining us on Rumble. Now, the guest that we have tonight is the leader of the New South Wales Liberal Democrats. And last time we had him on, it was back in episode 32. Adam and I got into a little bit of trouble for having him on back then. It was on the campaign trail. It was before he was elected to the New South Wales upper house. But I guess we can say that was the pre-interview. This is the post-election interview. And it's very nice to be able to say, welcome to the show, the Honourable John Ruddick MLC. How are you tonight?
Very well, gentlemen. Thanks very much for having me. I'm sorry to hear I got you in trouble last time. I had no idea, but I think I could probably imagine why.
Yeah, it wouldn't take too much to think about that one. I think that was pretty straightforward. But John, thank you very much to have you on again. And we've been following you now a little bit as well, because since you've been on our podcast, and we've been seeing what you've been doing in Parliament and things like that. So congratulations, and great to have you on. And I saw you the other night at the Liberal Democrats launch of the branch party in the Southwest Sydney, which was a pretty successful event and pretty good. And saw what you had to say, which was, always interesting and always good to hear you speak. So welcome aboard.
Good to see you the other night, Adam. Good to see, I agree. It was a successful meeting down there at Tekasula. So we've got we had our, the Liberal Democrats typically have got their vote from the North Shore of Sydney. Now then, during COVID, we lost the North Shore. Like, we had the Senate vote, and we lost the North Shore, but we went very well in Southwest Sydney. Now, at the state election, we again went very well in Southwest Sydney. That's because those people remember, the lockdowns, because they got affected by it more than anybody. But then we also got a pleasing vote on the North Shore, and particularly on the northern beaches. Sometimes up to sort of 6%, which is pretty good for a party with a campaign that barely had any money or volunteers. So, but anyway, the thing is, the Southwest is sort of like the area which we want to grow the party in.
Well, I mean, sorry, Stephen, there, just 1 second. You've got the likes of Victor Tay, and you've got Gemma Niosi as well. So those guys are pretty good. They're nice and young, fresh faces, and they work pretty hard. I saw Victor on the campaign trail during the federal election, it was always he was very popular out here, and he's got a fairly good following in community. And then and Gemma as well. So fresh faces, kind of doing a lot of hard work. Not unlike myself or Stephen did for One Nation when we were running the campaign trails for those guys. So that's what I think that's what the Southwest kind of really needs. I think out here, you'll get a lot of people moving from the city areas out to here now. We get a lot of people from Hurstville and places like that, Cronulla and that. They're moving further out this way now. They all kind of like made their money on their homes that went up in value, and now they kind of want a bit of land, so they kind of come out this way and can buy property and stuff like that. So you're getting a lot of different votership now, I think, as well out here. I'm pretty sure your stats would probably see that there's a bit of a trend that they've come from the city and starting to move out our way a little bit.
Oh yeah, that aspirational voters, that people. I mean, that area had always been hardcore Labor, but that has very much changed, over the last sort of 10 to 20 years. And then you saw Dai Lee win right in the heart of the Southwest, which is repudiation of the Labor Party. So, but look, I'll tell you, we are very pleased with the people we've got down there. The biggest factor in organisational politics is not good looks. It's not even good ideas, political ideas. It's enthusiasm. That's what takes you the furthest. And that we've got people, which have got a lot of enthusiasm in the Southwest. So good to see.
Awesome.
And now, when you were elected to the New South Wales Upper House, you have what's probably now a famous maiden speech, or maybe infamous maiden speech, because it was banned on YouTube and it went worldwide. It got worldwide coverage. But one of the things I noticed from your speech was the people that were in the gallery was a mix of the political divide. You had two members of the Liberal Party, Tim James and Tanya Davies. You had Craig Kelly from the UAP. You had Michael O'Neill from IMOP. You had Lyle Shelton from Family First, and Chris Smith, who's a broadcaster. So it goes to show that you're able to get on with people from all parties all across the political divide. How has it been for you in Parliament dealing with all the members of Parliament? And do you think that the New South Wales government, now that you've seen it on the inside, is working adequately for the people of New South Wales?
Well, look, I was expecting it to be a lot more confrontational than it is. Because I'd been involved in organisational politics in the Liberal Party and then in the Liberal Democrats. And I'd seen, a lot of factional street fights where there's a hell of a lot of animosity. But in the upper house, there's quite a collegial feel. Everybody generally gets along quite well. Now, there's lots of different parties, and it's a pretty pleasant working environment, and so no problems there. Now, the party which really stands out for having the most enthusiasm, which is what I was just saying is the most important ingredient, is the Greens. There's 4 Greens in the upper house, which is about 10% of the members. And, I really take my hat off to them. They are always on their feet. They're always pushing their agenda as hard as they possibly can. It's always a pretty, undiluted agenda. They don't compromise. I mean, we think of ourselves as the absolute opposite of the Greens. But in terms of their political energy, and knowing there's a hell of a lot of little things to know about how these parliaments work, and the Greens are all on top of it. So I'm impressed with that.
That's sad to hear, unfortunately, but it's a good thing as well, I guess. It's good for the Green supporters and voters.
Yeah, well, look, the Liberal Democrats believe that over the next few years we're going to become the right-wing equivalent of the Greens. We believe we're going to become a 10% purist parties, and all you other little parties are going to, join us. Okay, well, most of you will. We believe what we do need is an ideological purist party, an intellectual party. Okay, so we like the UAP, and we like One Nation, and we like the IMOP people, who I think are now called Heart, and we like Lyle Shelton, and we like a lot of people in the Liberal Party and the National Party. Okay, but what this country needs is a purist vision, okay, of a small government, the benefits of what small government will deliver to the people. Okay, so a lot of people come up to me at events. I say, "Oh, John, we like what you're doing, but why don't you merge in with One Nation and the UAP?" I said, "Well, look, we'll preference each other and we'll cooperate with each other in Parliament, but no, there is a competition on. There's a competition on to who can become that party on the right that's a purist party of like 10%. Gives you a lot of power in Parliament if you got 10%.
One of the things you said in your maiden speech is to call COVID a pandemic is an insult to pandemics, which I thought was a very good line. And we know that, Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts went to the federal election calling for a federal royal commission, but you're the first person that I've heard that has also called for state-based royal commissions into COVID. Now that you've been in Parliament and you've worked with all these people, these other politicians in there, is there an appetite for an inquiry or even a royal commission into the pandemic?
No, they all just want to move on because both parties were complicit in that dreadful period, which we're all suffering from now with the inflation. So the Labor Party absolutely has no interest because it's going to make the other Labor premiers look bad, and they were the worst. The Liberal premiers were very bad. The Labor premiers were next level. Okay, and the worst of all was silly Jacinda Ardern over in New Zealand, whose Labor Party just got their head kicked in, which is good to see. Yeah. But so the Labor Party has no interest. The Chris Minns has no interest. I mean, he should want to expose what the previous New South Wales Liberal government did with all the COVID hysteria. But the two problems they've got is they cheered it all on, the Labor opposition. They in fact only criticised the Liberal Party for not being more hysterical on COVID. And then they don't want their mates in the other states. Anastasia's got an election next year, then Mark McGowan's after that, or the Western Australian Labor Party, whoever their new guy is, and they were all crazy, so they don't want any scrutiny of it. Now, the Liberal Party and the National Party don't want any scrutiny of it because they were in government. That's okay, right. So now then, really, the crossbench is, the Greens are terrible on COVID, of course. They thought it was great, all the hysteria. And the other parties really, didn't make much of a song and dance about it. So it's little old me there saying, no, I don't want to move on from COVID because we're all suffering from the inflation caused by COVID. And it was an absolutely appalling demonstration of what big government can look like. So, no, I don't want to forget about it. And I won't shut up about COVID.
Yeah, please don't shut up about COVID because, I really feel like that that they have no idea about what's going on regarding the little people, like the regular people. I think they've lost touch with Middle Australia. And Middle Australia is the one that basically makes everything, gives you guys, well, not you personally, but gives you guys all the money to do what needs to be done with the country. That's all the taxpayer money comes from Middle Australia and all that kind of stuff. And they have no idea what really affects us. What is the moral obligation from our elected members regarding, the people of New South Wales and Australia as a whole?
Well, I mean, look, we have an election every 4 years, so if you don't like your local member, you can chuck them out. But look, there's two views of what the role of the parliamentarian is. So at one end of the spectrum, there are people who think that the role of the parliamentarian is to most accurately reflect the will of their constituency as well as possible in the parliament. So their job is to find out what the consensus view is in their electorate about a particular issue, and then just say that consensus view in the parliament. Now, at the other end of the spectrum is what sort of Edmund Burke came up with about 250 years ago. And he was like a British politician. And he said, look, if you vote for me, he was representing the seat of Bristol. He said, look, if you vote for me, I just want you to know what the deal is. I understand that you'll be voting for me because you think that I'm a wise person who should use my own brain to do what I think is right for the whole country. And so you people of Bristol are having an election and you're going to send to London the person that you think out of all the people in Bristol is the smartest person to make decisions that affect the whole nation. Now, I think, and then he said, look, if you don't like what I do, no problem. Don't vote for me at the next election. And I think that is the correct approach. A parliamentarian's job is to not think about their electorate. It is to think about what's in the national interest, or in our case, in the state's interest, in this generation and the next generation.
Okay, that's fairly interesting. You would, well, even that being the case, what about what Labor and the Liberals did in the previous elections and stuff like that, which now they've paid for, obviously, Liberal paid for it anyway, in the last state election, but can you see plans for the future? Can you see plans that the government itself, the current government, what they're trying to do as far as, cost of living, energy issues and things like that? Are they working towards making that better at all, do you think, from being on the inside, seeing now?
I'll tell you what they're obsessed with, gentlemen. Global warming, global boiling. Okay, that's everything. It's in every piece of legislation. They can't shut up about it. It's a religious cult. Okay, and it's we've got this committee hearing all day tomorrow about that. The government's bringing in a net zero carbon bill. We're going to have 50% less carbon by 2030, and we're going to have zero carbon by 2050. Okay, and all these people come in, and they say, "Oh, the government's not going far enough about this." Okay, so they're just left-wing parties all around the world, and sort of mainstream right-wing parties like the silly Liberal Party, the British Conservative Party. They've fallen for all this global warming stuff, but I call it global boiling now, gentlemen. It started off as global warming, then it didn't get that hot, so then they said, "Oh, well, now it's climate change." And then there was a few hot days in the Northern Hemisphere summer a few months ago. It sounded like it was really hot. Wow, this happens from some time on the planet. This is why there is a word called heat waves. Heat waves happen. And there was a heat wave in Europe early this year, and none other than the UN Secretary General got up and he said, "Oh, look, the era of global boiling is the era of global warming is over. It's now the era of global boiling." And I thought, okay, good. I never used the term climate change, but I'm going to use this one. It's global boiling. Okay, and I've got my Ugg boots on here in late. It's almost November in Sydney. Okay, so that's where the global boiling is going. So I encourage you and the listeners to don't talk about climate change, don't talk about global warming. It's global boiling from now on.
Because it's just taking the fun out of it. It's just taking the it's taking the piss out of them, because that's an absolute joke. Yesterday, what are we in now? We're at the end of October. Normally, you would be having like 30, 32 degree days. Yesterday, I worked all day in the jacket. Actually physically worked. Doing my job, installing up and down ladders, carrying stuff all day in a jacket, like it was too cold not to. So, and a hoodie on. It was wild. Oh, not yesterday. Sorry, it was Friday. Friday was the cold
how
day.
They get people is they have all these media reports going, it's going to be the hottest summer on record before it even happens. So they're putting that. Midweek, every week for about the last several weeks, there's been a report in the Sydney Morning Herald or somewhere saying, this weekend it's going to be a scorcher. This weekend it's going to break a record. Okay, it hasn't happened yet. They can't, but then they never talk about, this time last year, we were actually having record cold days in October and November. It was an unusually cold summer last year. Okay, but of course, that doesn't get reported. So now, look, I know you've had the magnificent Ian Plimer on your show before, and I think, I agree with everything he says. I think, what I think the problem is here is that, most of the people in the mainstream right-wing parties, like, the Liberal Party, the National Party, the Republican Party, the Conservative Party, most of their leadership are of view, look, the left's overstating it, but there must be some truth to it, so we should do something about it. And I think that's garbage, and I think it's cowardice. I think Ian Plimer is 100% correct. I think the science is junk science. There's so many. Now, what do I know about science? Bugger all, right? But I know a thing or two about histories and the history of mass delusions. And this is a mass delusion, okay? It's a global mass delusion. And, this misinformation, disinformation bill, that it's not just in Australia they're doing this. It's simultaneously, they've got similar legislation in the 5 big English-speaking nations, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and the US. And they all tried to bring it in at the same time. There's some level of global coordination going on. But if all these important countries have come out and said, we need to crack down on social media disinformation, there must be something that they really want to be shut up.
and they don't want debate over. Now, they're not going to shut down the Flat Earth Society, a really fringe little group that has no impact. They couldn't care less that people go out and talk about that. Okay, even though it's false, they just think, oh, well, no one's going to listen to it, so it doesn't matter. So what are they concerned about? Why do they want this power to suppress speech? It's global boiling. They don't want to debate about global boiling. And they saw what can happen during COVID with all their lies about COVID and their lies about the vaccine. They thought, wow, we can really lose control of the narrative here to, suppress people on the internet, the cookers, etc. Eventually, everyone's going to listen to them because they've got, facts on their side. And that's what they're worried about with global boiling, because they're all so invested in global boiling. There's a ton of people making a ton of money out of it while the rest of us suffer. And the politicians love it because they can be the savior. I mean, I see on social media people say that the politicians are making money out of global boiling. Look, I don't think that's the case. There's a ton of people who are, shady business people. The politicians' motive for it is that they can be like Winston Churchill. They can be almost like Jesus Christ. They can save the world, okay? And everyone will say for hundreds of years, Nat King, you saved the world. That's what motivates them. And then what motivates the media? Of course, they love it as well. The media just love hysteria. They just love big news story. And what's bigger than, the world's going to come to end because of carbon, So they just love it. So everyone, there's all these motives to hype it up. And we just got to keep fighting. This is the big battle of our era, gentlemen.
You mentioned the misinformation stuff. Did you notice straight after the referendum went down, the excuse straight away was misinformation and disinformation? Like they've just moved to that straight away.
Yeah, it never occurred to them that the same country that in 1967 voted by an overwhelming majority that we were going to treat Aboriginals equal under the law. It's more complicated than that, but that's roughly what people thought they were voting for. But anyway, we voted for that in 1967. And if anything, Australia would have to be a lot more racist in 1967 than it is in 2003. And then in 2023. In 2023, we had the vote 2 weeks ago. Overwhelmingly, once again, Australians vote for an egalitarian society. But does anybody in the Yes campaign or the left have any introspection and think, maybe it wasn't a good idea to create the voice based on, ancestry? No. They can't accept that and they go on about misinformation. They were lying every bloody day. The poor little No campaign was out there telling the truth. Every single thing they said was a lie. But then they say, the people voted no because they got tricked by the dodgy Yes No campaign. So then they want misinformation, disinformation,
And I found that, I got a chance. I was on a booth all day. I know Stephen worked on booths all day and stuff like that as well. And we, you know how what it's like on the camp when you kind of like handing out the flyers and stuff. You kind of talk to everyone there, and if you've got a reason, I know you guys actually had a bit of like out my way, right? Everyone's fairly respectful of each other's space and kind of like, we're happy to have a bit of a debate and stuff like that, but very little conflict as such between yes and noers, right? And it's actually quite nice. It's actually quite pleasing when you hear about like what happens up in Warringah up your way, Stephen, and you got those people like the yeses were kind of like swearing and carrying on, and the noers are kind of like defending themselves and swearing back and all that kind of stuff, and there's all like this kind of like I'll call it like timid violence, not really violence, it's just conflict. But then what happens is we've got out here, we're all having debates, but they genuinely believe in the BS that was said. Like they're talking about the Australian Constitution is already racist anyway, and then they would pull out some trivial piece of like legislation like 52 or something A or whatever it is, and the government can actually place a restriction on a particular race or something in Australia. And I said, right. And so I asked him this question. I said, okay, does it say that they can just say Aboriginal people are only allowed cannot do this? And they go, no, it can happen to any race. So then I said, it's not racist. We're all equal under the Constitution because we're all under that particular rule. I don't necessarily agree with that rule. But what I'm saying is everyone is equal under that rule. So they could say that, the Maltese Australian people have to stay at home on Sundays at 3:00. And they could say that the Lebanese... Sorry?
It would be legal if the Commonwealth passed a law saying that. Okay, because we do,
That's right.
Those yes campaigners are right. We do have a very dangerous race power in our constitution, which we should campaign on removing.
100%, I agree with that. But the thing is, at this point, it's all equal. Like, they can pick out any particular race and do it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an Aboriginal specific bill, right? And that's what they were using. So that, in essence, to me, they are lying to the voter. And okay, because I don't agree with that either. I don't think the government should be able to pick out one particular person of like race or whatever and say whatever. But that's what they were using, and I'm kind of like, well, it's not racist. And then I actually had yes voters listening to what I was saying, and then they're kind of like, well, is that true? And then the yes people would say, well, yeah, it's general. And they're like, well, what are you telling me that for then? Like they actually really did. Like, we only had a very, very small percentage of yes votes in our area. But that's how they believe they believe the propaganda, and those yes people, what I found, were fully yes to climate boiling and all that kind of stuff. They are just on this path of just taking it all in and not even thinking about it outside the square at all.
They don't want to think about it. It appeals to their emotions. It appeals to their emotions. They don't want to use their brain. They just go with what feels good.
That's right. I've got a question in the chat here from David. It says, is it true that the state governments are bringing in a treaty now?
Okay, well, what happened in New South Wales is we don't have a treaty, thank God. Chris Minns, as opposition leader, campaigned and he said, vote for me and I will bring in a treaty. And he foolishly said, regardless of the result in the voice referendum. Now, he said that was the Labor Party's position before the election, but I can't remember him saying it. Okay, so it wasn't a policy that he particularly highlighted. Now, then about 2 days after the voice referendum, Chris Minns reiterated that. He says, yeah, we'll bring in a treaty. We're going to go ahead with it. But then he sort of thought about it for another week and he says, oh, well, we won't be doing a treaty this term. Okay, we'll basically think about it in the next term. No, he's just kicked the can down the road to the never, never. And I don't believe we will have a treaty in New South Wales. Now, the thing about Chris Minns is that Chris Minns is not Dan Andrews. Okay, so as far as Labor leaders go in 2023, he's about as right-wing as he's going to get. Okay, now he's still going to be stupid on a whole ton of things, net zero carbon. Okay, to start with, but he's and they're bringing in a sort of some bill about transgender stuff, and it's a lot more watered down than the Victorian version. Okay, so he's basically New South Wales right Labor. So I think we're going to, in answer to that question, I don't believe we'll have a treaty in New South Wales for the foreseeable future, maybe not ever, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing, but that's a bit scary too, there, John. Though, because what happens is you're still laying the foundation. So I still think it's very important to really dig down and fight against all those kind of things, because that misinformation, disinformation bill is going to be pretty bad. Then we've got the one where it's the anti-conversion therapy stuff that's coming through. Those kind of things are laying the footpath. All right, so Minnsy is not really a tyrannical Dan Andrews, but the party is. And if they lay the foundation for it, you don't know you're not going to get just into Ardern, or we're not going to get her, but somebody like her or somebody like Dan Andrews come in the near future.
Look, there has been in New South Wales Labor a much better culture than most of the other Labor state divisions, and I'll tell you where that came from. In the 1950s, in most states there was a anti-communist breakaway party called the Democratic Labor Party. Now, these were people who were genuinely anti-communist. They saw communists taking over unions. They were union people, and they said, these communists are pro-Moscow. These are bad people. And they were worried about these communist-friendly unions having so much power in the Labor Party. Now, those anti-communist Labor guys left the Labor Party and started a little right-wing party called the Democratic Labor Party, which got a lot of votes for about a quarter of a century, and preferenced Robert Menzies and the Liberal Party. But in New South Wales, those anti-communist Labourites did not leave, okay, because the communist trade union issue was just not as big a deal in New South Wales. So that meant that there was always sort of Irish Catholic common sense, generally not crazy lefties, okay, and that's and this is why we had Bob Carr, Morris Yammer. These guys are pretty centrist types of blokes.
Yeah, the right wing
Labor
Party
has changed. Yeah, well, look, the Labor Party for the first time ever at their national conference earlier this year, the left delegates had a majority. So the Labor Party is moving to the left, and Albanese's from New South Wales, and he's pretty left wing. What's happened because the Greens have been so successful, part of their success has been pulling the Labor Party to the left. Okay, and that's what, if we have a 10% purist party on the right, like the Liberal Democrats, then we would ideally pull the Liberal Party to the right, particularly on fiscal matters.
Well, that's probably a good segue to the next question that I was going to ask you. I was with One Nation, but now I'm not with One Nation, so I'm kind of out there in the wilderness at the moment, you might say. I feel like a lot of people are as well. They feel like there's no real political home for them at the moment. Some people are looking at the Liberal Party and hoping that they reform. Some people are looking at the Liberal Democrats. But if you were to, I guess, pitch to those people out there that really feel like they have no political home, and a lot of them are probably, go back to the years of John Howard and Peter Costello and say that's what we want. That's the type of government that we want, but we don't really see an example of that at the moment. How would you pitch to those sorts of people?
Okay, well, look, politics is fundamentally about one thing, which is policies. Now, we have to have good policies will be good for this generation and future generations. It's really important we get these things right. Australia was on par with Argentina 100 years ago, but then Australia has generally had pretty pro-free enterprise governments since then. Argentina's had one socialist government after another, and now they're really 25% of a once rich country lives in genuine poverty. Okay, so politics is really important. Now you've got to get the policies right. Now history tells us that the libertarian vision of a small government with free trade and free enterprise and civil liberties, this is what delivers human brilliance at the highest possible rate. Okay, and so we look at places like Singapore and Switzerland and Hong Kong. Economically, these little countries with very low tax rates have just boomed. And we think the whole world can do that under a libertarian vision. So if you're going to join a political party, you need to get the party that's got the right ideology underpinning it. And the correct ideology, which is going to have the maximum impact on benefiting humans long term, is libertarianism. Okay, history proves that. And that's the way. So we want to, if you want to get involved in politics, it's because you want to bring about good policies. Now you need a party that has a ideological foundation. You can't just be a political party that when they read the paper in the morning and say, oh, this is an issue. Oh, we've got an opinion on that. And then something else comes and they just react to that. Now you need something which is a consistent ideological underpinning. Which says, look, our approach to all government matters is to go smaller. And so because we're right, that's why people should get involved with the Liberal Democrats.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, speaking about that, sorry, Stephen, you go.
No, I was gonna change tact. I saw you earlier in the month at the Australians monarchy convention, the national conference, and you actually spoke really well. A lot of the speakers were more focused on the referendum, and obviously it was a hot topic at the time. But I went there because I'm a little bit on the fence when it comes to the monarchy and the republic. On one side, I don't like the British monarchy. On the other side, I'm not really confident in the leadership in Australia right now to be able to implement a republic that would be adequate. Although I would like to see maybe Australia eventually be able to stand on its own. But you raised some very good points. The first one was a quote that you said from Winston Churchill, and that was, "The crown is important not so much for the power it wields, but for the power it denies others." And then you went on to say that the reason why the Westminster system here in Australia and elsewhere in the world has been so successful is because the power of the crown comes from birth and it cannot be contested, whereas maybe an election for a president can be. And we're seeing that in America, or we have seen that in the most recent years. Can you expand on that a little bit and maybe argue the case why the system that we have now has worked so well?
Constitutional monarchy is the most successful form of government that mankind has yet known. Now, the English stumbled into this arrangement in the 1600s. What happened was England had a tyrannical king. Most kings are tyrants, okay? And they had a tyrannical king called King Charles I, and then they cut his head off in 1649. And England, which has got the world's most famous monarchy today, England was, I think there was a republic in the Dutch in Holland around the same time, but England became a republic for 11 years. Okay, and it turned into a republican form of a dictatorship. Wow. So then the English went to the dead king's brother who'd been hiding in France. They said, "Look, this is King Charles II." They said, "Look, we got a really good deal for you. Come back to England, be the king, live in the palace, but don't exercise political power. Let the Parliament run the power, run the policy, etc. But we will give you the power, Mr. Monarch, of being able to dismiss a prime minister and call a fresh election." And the king said, "That's a good deal." Now that king sort of messed it up, and it was another sort of 20 years, the Glorious Revolution in 1689, was when they really locked in that principle of constitutional monarchy. So then it spread around the world, and it's a very, very, it's an odd form of government. It's not like someone would have dreamed this up on a piece of paper before it actually happened, but it's turned out to be a wonderful form of government. Why is that? Because somebody has to sit at the top of the political apex. So in a monarchy, that's the crown. In a republic, it's going to be a president. Some individual is going to be sitting atop the political structure. Now, when a politician gets to the top and there's absolutely no one above them, not even a crown above them, so often egomania comes along and they think, "I'm the Messiah. I'm a great man of history." And then they think, "Well, I don't want to ever have elections ever again." And they certainly don't want to give up the trappings of power. So they become a dictatorship. And this is the story of most dictatorships. Now, in a constitutional monarchy, the most powerful person is the prime minister or the premier, and they have a lot of ego and ambition, personal ambition, but they know that they can't step too far out of line because the king can dismiss them. Now, that has happened in the last sort of 100 years or so. It's happened 3 times. It happened in England in 1911. The House of Commons was having a big fight with the House of Lords over welfare reform, and the people kept voting for the lower house to bring about this reform, but the upper house, the House of Lords, said no, we're not going to let that be the law. So then the king just dismissed the Parliament. They had a fresh election, and the people endorsed what the king had done. Okay, now it happened in 1932 in the middle of the Depression in New South Wales. We had a very charismatic, very left-wing Premier, Jack Lang, and he was going completely crazy. And the governor, Sir Philip Game, dismissed him. And he said, "Look, I'm removing you from power, but we're going to have a fresh election. So the people are going to decide anyway." And, Jack Lang contested that election and got his head kicked in. The people definitely overwhelmingly voted for the United Australia Party, which is what it was called at the time. Yeah. Now, then, of course, more famously in 1975, there was a political impasse, a very high-stakes political impasse. And the Governor-General stepped in, dismissed the Prime Minister, and immediately we had an election. And lo and behold, the people once again endorsed the decision to dismiss because they voted for Malcolm Fraser and the Liberal Party and not Gough Whitlam, who had recontested it. So it's a wonderful form of government, constitutional monarchy. We have now the Crown sits up there, and as you mentioned, Stephen, yes, they get it from birth. Now that ticks off a lot of people who believe in egalitarianism. It ticks people off. It irritates people to think that there is this royal family who live in unbelievable luxury and prestige. I mean, they are probably the biggest celebrities in the world, the British royal family, right? When a US president writes their memoirs, they always include a photo of when they met the Queen, okay, or the King. So it's a big deal. Okay, I think the Queen, the King, outranks the Pope on the global stage. Okay, but so it annoys people, particularly in Australia. Why does this family have to have all this and they didn't do anything for it? And I say, wow, what a price to pay. Some family gets it real easy, and they do. People say, oh, it must be a hard job being a royal. Garbage. Of course, this is why everyone wants to marry into the royal family. Of course, it's the best thing in the world. So what? That one family, what a small price to pay. One family gets this life of pomp and luxury, okay, but they make a system work where we know that things can't get out of control, and that's a good thing. So you look at what are the happiest countries in the world? England, Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Belgium, Canada, New Zealand. And then I always like using the examples of the the Caribbean and the South Pacific. Now, most of these countries are constitutional monarchies, and they're not rich countries, okay, but they're generally very happy countries. You go to these countries, Vanuatu, whatever, the Cook Islands, are very happy. You go to the Bahamas, St. Kitts, they're all happy because they don't have dictatorships where people get out of control. Now, there are two dictatorships in the Caribbean, Haiti, which is a hellhole, and Cuba, which is a hellhole, because they are republics. So I used to think that we should become like America, have an elected president, but no, constitutional monarchy, I think, is a wonderful form of government. And the best thing about our monarchy is that, that they do live overseas. They really have no... They're so disconnected from our politics, but we know that they will dismiss a prime minister or a premier if there is overwhelming public desire for them to do that.
And I think that's a misconception about Gough Whitlam. Everyone says, oh, the Governor General sacked Gough Whitlam, which he did, but then it just went to an election and the Australian people sacked Gough Whitlam. It wasn't so much the Governor General, he just dissolved the Parliament.
Well, you know what happened then? That was in 1975, Stephen. And then I'll tell you what, all those Laborites, they forget this little piece of history. In 1977, there was another election, and Gough Whitlam was the leader of the opposition, and he ran again. And he got his head kicked in almost as bad. I think he won 2 seats. So, there was the people. It's not like in the heat of the moment, they said, oh, we've got to get rid of Gough. No, even after they've thought about it for a good 2 years, they said, no, Gough, we really don't want you back.
Yeah, they never tell you that part. But
that's right.
Is there any way? I mean, if we say the Westminster system and the monarchy is the best way, is there any way that Australia can separate itself from England? Like, can the crown just be a symbol without?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I appreciate you saying that, because I can see that you really can see that that's really what it is, Stephen. You're right. It is. As a human being which has to be a custodian of the crown, no, we do need a human there. We do need a human, and it's just turned out that the best human to give it to is the next in line on the throne. Now, those royals, when you imagine being a 4-year-old kid like Prince William, okay, he's about 40 now or whatever, but there must have been a time between the age of 3 and 4 when it starts to dawn on him. He says, wow, I'm going to be the king one day. Okay, and they're going to think, well, that's a really big deal. Okay, and now they're still very young little infants, but they're going to grow up. Now it turns out that these people really have zero ego about them. They know that they just got it from birth. They didn't get it because they're great people or anything. And so the royals are always. It's not like they walk around like some South American dictator and they think, I'm the greatest thing in the world. Look at me. they're actually very modest people. They obviously like the job, but they sort of, and they're not political. I mean, now Prince Charles did annoy me when he was the prince, because he was political and he was absolutely doing what his job is. You know, they get a very good deal, the royal family. We say, look, you can have all these palaces and all this easy life. You just can't comment on politics. That's a good deal, isn't it? Now, the Queen, you know, after her very long life, nobody knows what her politics are, and that's how it should be. We all know Charlie Boy is a hardcore leftist, but to his credit and to our relief, since he's been the king, he's shut his mouth about politics. So good boy, Charles.
Yeah, that's what my next point was going to be. It's a bit scary though, being in the monarchy, and I too like you. I think the system ain't broken, so don't change it. And I think it would be far worse off. Imagine if Albanese brought in, you know, some sort of like amendments, you know, for the constitution or whatever, and we'd have like a republic under that government. Would be horrible. But I think what you were saying, I agree. I think the Westminster system's pretty good at the moment. But my question was, like, I would be worried if King Charles did start to push his agenda, you know, and we know, and I know, you know, without going into conspiracy and stuff like that, you know, he's friendly with the WEF, he's friendly with, you know, WHO and all those kind of people. And, you know, that's it. And a lot of our audience, and I'll speak for the audience and for the people who really do support LDP and support One Nation, you know, they're worried about that kind of thing. They are worried about big, controlled, centralized governments with their agendas and their things to, you know, take over, you know, the world as such, like a big James Bond villain. And, you know, so, you know, they are worried about those things. So, yeah, I was going to ask you, you know, do we have means or ways through our parliament to actually push back against some of the stuff that comes through from a king that would be left wing and start to become tyrannical?
Well, look, he's more than anything, he's going to want to preserve. I mean, the British royal family has been around since 1066 and William the Conqueror. They've got the millennial anniversary coming up in the year 2066. They're going to want to stay in business. And they will stay in business as long as they don't get involved in politics. Now, the system does have a theoretical flaw in it, which is, well, what happens if you get a monarch? Okay. Now, and if anyone's going to do that, it would be Charlie. Okay. Now, I said he's been a good boy since he got on the throne. He has said a few things about global boiling, which have annoyed me, but he's trying to hold back. But what do you do under the system if the monarch becomes politicized? Well, it would be a constitutional crisis. And I would say if it was a really prolonged thing, we'd want to give them a reasonable amount of flexibility. We wouldn't want to overthrow things for a few trivial comments. But if he really started flexing his muscle, I think we've got a great option in Australia, which is, you know, Princess Mary from Tasmania. She didn't just marry a Danish prince, she married the Crown Prince of Denmark. And that monarchy is even older than the British monarchy, and they've always been very good friends. So what we could have is Princess Mary, the little Aussie girl, has had 4 kids. Her eldest kid is going to be the King of Denmark one day. We could say to one of the other kids, or say, hey, look, we've got a really good deal for you. Why don't you come down to Australia, live in Yarralumla, and just be a low-key Australian-based monarch? And it'll just be like Scandinavia. You know, the Scandinavian monarchs ride around on bicycles. You know, they go shopping. You know, take the bike. You know, that's very low. It's not like the British monarchy is this massive industry. Okay, which the whole, you know, you can go to Vietnam or Zambia, you know, or Mongolia. Everyone knows who Princess Diana is. Everyone knows, you know, everyone knows about the British royal families. But those other royal families, I mean, most people don't even know Belgium's got a royal family or the Netherlands has got a royal family. They hardly know anything about them. That's good. So we could say to one of Mary's kids, look, Charles is annoying us because of his politicized views. We'll just slot you in there. Then that solves the problem. We've got an Australian-based monarch, and we would have to, you know, we'll have to reteach them the lesson about don't be political.
All right, so I've put the link in the chat if anyone wants to call in and ask John a question. I have a question in the chat, though, from David. Whoops, that's the wrong one. It's this one here. Do you think John Ruddick would make a good politician in New South Wales?
You know, you meet a lot of people in politics, and I got to say, you know, John Ruddick is one of the finest citizens I have met. He's a very, very nice guy. He's a real fighter. He's got good instincts on everything. So yes, he was number 2 on our Senate ticket, and he was also on our upper house ticket for the New South Wales election. I think John would be terrific. So he's got his hands full at the moment with the paramedics and the stupid vax mandate, which drags on and on and on. The government's just been malicious to people now. That's what it is now. And the media's not taking any interest in it. But I mean, that's pretty bad. The government's just being malicious to fireys and coppers and ambos who rightly didn't take the stupid vax. So yes, John Ruddick, absolutely. I'd love to see him in Parliament.
Now, there's another quote that you said in your maiden speech, which I thought was really good. You said, "Real leaders don't follow the polls; they change them." Now, with that said, you also brought up anarcho-capitalism in your maiden speech. A lot of people, their eyes glaze over when they hear that because they don't quite understand it. I'm one of those people. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, well, anarcho-capitalism is a theory where we wouldn't just have a small government; we would end up having no government. So that would be the ideal. Now, we would still have, basically society would be run via private contracts. Okay, so for example, let's say people think, oh, well, we need a government for the court system. Okay, well, the anarcho-capitalist would say, let's say, you know, I buy a car off Adam for $10,000 and we have a little contract between ourselves. And there'll be a clause in that contract saying, look, if we end up having a dispute, we will go to the ABC court to resolve it. And we both agree that whatever the ABC court says, we will abide by that. Now, we're going to go, Adam and I, as a private, entering into a private contract, we would both agree to what court we'd want to go to. We'd probably have to pay a very small fee to that court for saying, look, we don't want to have a dispute. Hopefully, we don't expect to have a dispute, but just in case we do, we've said that we'll go to you. Now, the courts would be run like a business. Now, the courts are going to win business by being low cost, by being quick, but most importantly, by being wise and fair. People are going to say, oh, no, this court over here has got a really good reputation for doing the right thing. Okay, now our current legal system is so convoluted and it basically serves rich people in most cases. Okay. And it's really, really long. Okay. And it's, and I think a lot of the time it's not fair. Okay. The more you've got, the more money you've got, the more the legal system looks after you. So then we could say, well, what about, so I think the courts can very easily be run by private contracts. And you can have, you might say, well, look, if we go to the ABC court, but one of us doesn't agree, that we can say, well, we will agree that we can appeal it to another court. Okay. The free market can sort this out. What about the police? Well, the anarcho-capitalists would say, because remember, everyone's going to have a lot more money in their pocket because there's going to be no taxes to pay. Okay. No taxes on anything. Okay. So most people are going to have a lot more money. So what we would do with the police, we would say, so I live on the lower North Shore. There might be 3 businesses here, private security firms, and they would offer, I'd pay like an insurance premium. And so I would take out policing services from a private firm for a year, and I'd pay them an insurance fee. Hopefully I'd never hear from them. And then if someone tries to break into my house in the middle of the night, I would ring up that police firm, and I think they'd be there quicker because they want me to renew the contract at the end of the year. So sometimes you can ring the cops and it's just like, it's hard to get them round. Okay, I understand. I've never done that, of course. And but a private firm would be saying, yes, Mr. Ruddick, I'll come round and I'll sort out that robber straight away. Thank you. Okay, so the police can be sorted out, and there'd be competition. Now, some people are going to offer a police service, and they're going to say, look, our insurance premium is more expensive, but we promise to get there quicker than anybody else. And, we've got more lethal guns and we've got better trained officers. Other people will say, look, we're a low-cost police service, so we may not be out there, and the market will work it out. So now, obviously, with health, we don't want the government involved in health in any way, and we think that I mentioned in the speech, Switzerland, the government plays no role. Government doesn't run hospitals, doesn't employ doctors, doesn't do dentistry, doesn't do aged care. The government has nothing to do in Switzerland with the healthcare system, except they give a voucher to low-income people to go and buy private health insurance. So 99% of people have got the private health insurance, and the Swiss have got the best health stats in the world. Okay, now, every election we hear about Medicare. Oh, you know, the Liberal and Labor Party say, oh, we're gonna put more money into it. And they're right. They always say they put more money into it, more and more money, and it's so expensive and it's so bureaucratic and it's so all over the place. No, we believe the free market can work it out. So we believe that an anarcho-capitalist society would result in there being a lot more harmony and efficiency, diversity, and creativity. And we believe poor people, there's always going to be, even in a very rich society, there's always going to be 5% of people who fall through the cracks. Now, that's happening today in our democratic society, and it would happen in a anarcho-capitalist society as well. Now, in today's society, we go and set up big government welfare programs to provide a hammock for these people. But the anarcho-capitalists would say, okay, well, it's not in anybody's interest that we have 5% of people out there destitute, they're going to starve to death type of thing. So rich people would come together. They'd say, look, we've got a problem here. Let's pool money. Let's employ some really hotshot executives, and let's get those people genuinely out of poverty. Let's get them back on their feet. So look, anarcho-capitalism is the unknown ideal. And in my speech, I advocated, I said, look, we should set out on a journey on the way to anarcho-capitalism. We should decrease the government by about 5% a year for about, 30, 40 years. And we may well get the government. I think the government now is about 50% of our GDP at all three levels, probably 60. But let's say we got the government spending down to about 5% of our GDP. Now, it may well be at that point, the democratic consensus says, no, we can't cut government any further. We really need this, and the free market can't solve this issue. And that's what the people think. Okay, well, we'll keep a really small little government. If that is the case, it would probably be around defence, okay, and maybe one or two other things. But, the anarcho-capitalist theorists say, no, we could actually have a better defence system if there was no government. But anyway, so look, that's the goal we want to, that's the ideal we want to head in the direction of, no government.
Yeah, that's interesting points there. That is interesting. It's a tantalizing theory of having very, very little to no government. But I don't know, that I kind of I still think that we still need a little bit of government. I was thinking, what you were saying, once you got to a certain point, maybe that's where it would stay. I like the idea that you're still flexible and open to a government of some sort, because I just not sure that tyranny doesn't come from a free market either. Look at Facebook and look at those kind of free market enterprises, biggest GDP or biggest capital in the world, and then they can still censor us and tyrannize us anyway. And they're not even political as such.
They're so big, they are integrating themselves with left-wing governments, as the Twitter files have said. So, look, what will happen in a free market situation is that in 20 years from now, it's very, very likely that Facebook will be a thing of the past, or it'll just be overtaken by some new technology, or it might still be there, but there'll be just it will not have the sort of dominance I suspect it has right now. So the free market will sort these things out eventually. If someone's come up with such a great idea, and Facebook obviously is a good commercial idea, other people will, experiment and work out how to do it better. So, but we've got the tyranny at the moment. Okay, and now when the Americans declared independence from Britain and won the War of Independence in the 1780s, for about 5 years they had a thing called, they didn't have the US Constitution. They had 13 states which were largely independent, and they had a very weak sort of central government running things. And that was actually the ideal. At that stage, the GDP take of the government would have been about 2%. And then they said, oh, well, no, we need a more stronger government. So they wrote the US Constitution. Now then, and that started off, you know, as a very small government. But what always happens with government is a crisis comes along and the government says, oh, look, we just need more power temporarily. So then the crisis goes away and the power remains. So what happened in this country was, you know, initially in 1901, when we had the Commonwealth, you know, Commonwealth got its money from customs duties, okay, not much. Then World War I comes along and they say, oh, well, look, we need to have the power to do income tax. But once the war's over, we'll give the income tax powers back to the states. Okay, the war came and went, then they kept the income tax powers. And the same thing happened with company tax powers in World War II. Okay, and now the state governments are just welfare bludgers off the federal government. Okay, that is where most of their money comes from. And so, you know, the states don't really have any, they don't have much power over their own budget. If this is absolutely not, this big, massive Canberra bureaucracy is absolutely not what the founding fathers of Australia had in mind.
No, I agree. I agree with you there, John. So just on this small government kind of thing. So, you know, I've been getting a little bit involved in council and whatnot. I know LDP is getting a little bit involved in council possibly as well. So I was thinking, did you know, I don't know, I'm not sure if this was in your time in Parliament or not your time in Parliament, but that apparently the state government have voted on a 1% increase in council rates. So pretty much everyone is going to get a 1% hike in their council rates. But the New South Wales Parliament voted that 68% of that 1% is going to go to the state government and not actually back to the people in the councils. Have you heard about that one?
I hadn't, no. I've been hearing reports from all over New South Wales that people's council rates are being hiked. Okay, so yeah, this is something that we do want to focus on, the New South Wales council elections next year, next September. We want to run on an anti-woke, get woke out of local council. Okay, because you go into any local council and there's rainbow stuff, there's global boiling stuff, there's pronoun stuff, there's you know, voice stuff. Okay, they're all left wing, and you know, and they should just be concerned with the basics. You know, local council for most of our history was not particularly ideological. Well, it's become that way, so and that's a bad thing. And they're trying to bring these smart cities in, you know, via the local council under the radar.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was a massive topic that wasn't that we needed to talk about as well. Was that, you know, we're all slated, like, what? So I've got people, because they don't talk about it very much and they don't give you the right detail on smart cities, you know, and it's not smart as in it intelligent smart city, right? It stands for like surveillance, metering, something technology. You know what I mean? That's what smart stands for. Yeah, it's not smart as in like, you know, an iPhone smart, or, you know, like, let's face it, an iPhone is smart because it can monitor everything and track everything and transfer everything that you do to somebody else. That's what's smart about it. It's basically a tracking device that you can actually leave at home, you know, until we all get microchips, argument's sake. But a smart city is a metering system where facial recognition cameras, everything gets transferred into and consolidated into one location, and then your information of what you've done through the day, let's face it, is all there up for record to be sold and to be used against you, i.e. just like in China with the you know, digital identification systems and things like that they have. So people are worried about, I know a lot of people that are worried about that. And despite that as well, which we don't hear much about as well, is the densification program that the state government is pushing upon our councils. And if our councils don't agree with state government, they get their funding cut. People don't realise that big brother state government actually can punish council.
Now, gentlemen, just excuse me for a moment. I've got to go to the gym, so I'll be 35 seconds.
That would be a good time for people to call in. We had some people waiting in the background, but Adam was talking too long, so I couldn't bring them on. They've jumped off. But if you want to join the conversation, we're probably getting towards the end now. So you know, if you do want to call in now's the time. We'll get you on and have a quick call with John, ask him a question. I know there's a lot of comments in the chats and questions in the chats as well. We haven't been able to get to them tonight, unfortunately.
That's because I've been speaking for too long, apparently.
Yes. There's a lot of long-winded questions as well. But if maybe people in the chat, if you want to keep your questions short, it's probably the best way. But John, I was just saying we're getting towards the end now, and we probably should wrap things up because we know that you've got a busy schedule and you've got to be in Parliament tomorrow. But one of the things. Hold on one sec. We've just got a caller call in, so we'll quickly take his call. Richard Storch.
Hey, Richard.
Now we've probably only got a minute or two, Richard, for you to ask a question. But
he's on mute.
I'll just take. Can you take yourself off mute, Richard? Hello, Richard. Can you hear us?
Yep, there he is.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Good, thank you. You'd like to ask John a question?
John, are you really serious when you say Charles hasn't been political since he became king?
Well, I mean, I saw there was some the London mayor launched a doomsday clock about global boiling, and Charles was there and endorsed it. But that's he did say, 2 days after his queen died, he addressed the nation. He basically said, my days as a political activist are over. But look, if you're saying there's other examples, I'm keen to hear it.
All right. Thanks for that, Richard. You've gone on mute again, but we'll have to let you go because we've got to finish up now. But thanks for coming on. We'll have you on. Yep. See you, Richard. Okay, John. So the final segment of the show is something that we've called build your own fantasy government. It's a little bit like fantasy football. Sorry, Adam, go.
Just 1 second. Could we just let John finish on the question that I asked before he had to go for a second? Could you just let him just do a quick short comment on what my question was regarding councils and how that there's 1% increase and 20 and 68% are going to state government, just for the moment, just if you had something to say regarding that.
Well, look, I didn't know anything about it, so I'll look into it. I know that the council rates are soaring, going through the roof all around the state, and I'm pretty sure that the councils could run on about they could have a massive reduction in spending, no one would really notice it, overnight if they stop wasting all this money on all these progressive causes. But I was very interested to hear you, Adam, saying what Smart Cities stands for. So once we have finished, I am going to look that up because that sounds very interesting. So thank you for telling me about that.
Thanks for at least listening to me and hearing what I had to say about it.
Just got maybe we'll just do some rapid fire questions just quickly for some people in the chat. Neil's asking, what would John do to fix the housing crisis? I know we can't really do rapid fire on that one, but do you have anything quickly that you can say, John?
Yeah, well, we would abolish the zoning laws. If people own property, let them do what they want with it. Now, there's a city in America. One of the biggest cities in America is Houston in Texas. Now, you never hear about Houston, even though it's about the 4th or 5th biggest city in America. Because unlike the other big cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston does not have inner city crime problem. Now, even though it's much bigger than Sydney. Now, this is because it's a free-for-all in Houston, and it's a beautiful city. Okay, now what happens is a property owner will not be an idiot with their property. They're going to sort of do what's good for that property. Now, some people might make some mistakes, but we should let people do what they want to do with their property, and that we should not have people's property rights tied up with local council. So then what would happen is, under this arrangement, within sort of, 30, 40 years, the lower North Shore of Sydney would look like Manhattan today. There would be a ton of beautiful, high-quality apartment blocks, okay? And now if people don't want to live there, that's fine, okay? They can go and live on the Central Coast. They can go and live in the western suburbs. But a lot of people will want to live there. And, so that's... we just sort of let people do what they want to do with their property, and there will not be a housing crisis.
Yeah, we've got a lot of issues with our people. Talk to me all the time. I have the advantage of going in and out of people's homes, and I'm part. My industry is part of the renovation side of things, with blinds, doors, and awnings. So what happens is people talk to me all the time. I had a nightmare of getting a granny flat built on my property. I couldn't. The council took 6 months to get this thing done, and then they only correct one little thing, and then you get to the next stage, and there's something else is wrong. So they don't actually look at a whole document. They get up to the first mistake and say, well, there's a mistake here, take it back and things. So you're going to pay another fee and then send it back. And then they'll find another mistake. I mean, all these things cost people money, investors money, cause delays. And what happens is, so out west, we've got massive, bigger blocks of land, say, than in a city, right? So we've got 900 square meter properties, especially in old southwest Sydney. Okay. And what happens is people could put granny flats on there. Okay. But then the council gets involved with all these stupid little rules, especially green tape, and prevents people from building a small little house where you could have 2-bedroom unit, like a 2-bedroom granny flat on your property, split rental, and have and kind of ease the housing crisis. So there is a lot of issue with red tape and green tape in council regarding properties and housing.
Well, granny flats are a no-brainer. There could be people could build a granny flat, very quickly if there was no government involved. Now, no one's going to be an idiot and build a granny flat that's going to fall down. The roof's going to fall down and kill granny. Okay, but we would have an explosion in granny flats. They're not that complicated to build, and then that would go massively to fixing up, the short-term housing crisis.
And making a bit of money for the person who puts the granny flat on their property as well.
The rental returns from granny flats are fantastic. And it enhances the value of the property. So everyone's a winner.
Yep.
All right, John, final segment. It's called Build Your Own Fantasy Government. Now it's kind of like Build Your Own Fantasy Football Team. I know you're a big fan of the North Sydney Bears. So if you could pick, you're in charge of the next Parliament of Australia, and you can pick 5 or 6 people to head up the next government of Australia. They can be current politicians, former politicians. They can be experts in a certain field. Anyone you want to choose. Some people have even picked. We have this recent trend lately where people are picking dead people. So it's completely up to you. You're in control. 5 or 6 people. Who would you choose?
Well, I would choose if we really wanted to make the state great, we would choose the most ideologically hardcore libertarians in the Liberal Democrats, and they would be, people who would be. Really want to get it done. This is what's happening in Argentina. They've got a really hardcore libertarian who is sort of 50-50 to be the next president. We find out in about 3 weeks. And he is a self-confessed anarcho-capitalist. Now, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were very good leaders on a whole range of fronts, and particularly with economics. But this Argentinian guy, he'll be like 10 times better than Margaret Thatcher on economics. Okay, that's if he wins. Now it's 50-50. So this is what we would want. We don't want big names, big personalities. We want big ideas. The best idea is radical libertarianism.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well,
so
thank you,
big libertarians.
Yep. Thank you very much, John. We really appreciate your time. I know you've got a busy, hectic schedule, so thank you for coming on. For people that want to follow you, what's the best way to do it?
Twitter and Facebook. We're trying to get on more platforms. We would like to. I think we've got some TikTok thing happening, and maybe a bit of a YouTube channel happening. But Twitter is sort of my main thing. But we've put a lot of the parliamentary speeches also on Facebook.
I noticed a lot of them go on Instagram as well. So check it. We'll put all those links in the description so people can follow along. But all the best in Parliament. I hope you do get to achieve something in there. Well, you've got quite a long time, 8 years, so it's good that you're in there, and you seem to stand for all the things that Adam and I, are very passionate about. Like, for example, the COVID stuff and housing affordability and those sorts of things. So we're very happy that you're in there, and all the best.
Okay, thank you very much. Honour to be with you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much, John, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds great.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it around everywhere. It really helps for everyone to share it around. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.